The following voicemail messages were sent between Michael and Andy over a number of days and contain spoilers.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey Matt, how's it going? Just popping out for a little afternoon supermarket trip. Rewatched Night and the City. I'm finding it very difficult to remember the name of this movie. Pretty generic name, but maybe not generic when it was released. I don't know, but at this point, I feel like there's been about 1,000 crime films that have either Night or City or both in the title. I say rewatched because I watched it about 3 weeks ago and been very stretched lately and found myself dozing off in a lot of films that I've seen. So this was one such film. And on that first viewing, I was like, I feel like there's a lot there that I missed. And even though I liked it first time round, I knew that I hadn't kind of given it a fair shake, having missed quite a few key scenes. So I was happy to discover this weekend when I revisited it that it did benefit from filling in those extra pieces of detail that I'd missed. I thought it was a good movie first time I watched it, or watched in inverted commas. But having now revisited it, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Really, 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 really loved it. One of the best film noir crime movies I've ever seen, I would say. I have this weird thing with film noir where even though the genre film noir doesn't explicitly indicate that it will be a detective movie or a mystery, those sort of styles of film noir are so imprinted on me that whenever I sit down to watch a film noir and I don't get a mystery or I don't get a detective investigation thing, I feel a little bit shortchanged. So it's kind of good watching this movie a second time round, just completely on its own terms. Not going, this is going to be like a Humphrey Bogart type movie, but no, this is a crime movie. And it is a film noir in every sense of the word. It's even got like a femme fatale and everything, but there's no mystery component to it. It's also obviously not set in America. A lot of the most iconic film noirs are set in America. So maybe a few little preconceptions about what I might be getting when I first watched it were gone. I could just have a clean viewing experience with it. Speaking of the setting, it's probably the best depiction of London I've seen in a movie. But I'm not really like racking my brains to think of all the different London movies. There's obviously like things like Notting Hill, which like really glamorize it. And there's a iconic opening of 28 Days Later. And I don't know, it's nil by mouth London. I feel like there's like got to be quite a few kitchen sink movies set in London. But this obviously I wasn't alive in 1950 or 1949 whenever this was shot, so I don't really have a clue what London was like. But to see a movie from this era that's so widely shot on location, even like in car shots where 9 times out of 10 that would be rear projection, it's all of the vehicle shots, as far as I could tell, were all filmed for real. And there's even like one shot which takes in, I think, multiple London locations. You're just driving from one to the other, but so many recognizable locations. And then lots of other locations that I couldn't recognize, but I could kind of go, oh yeah, right. So this is probably an industrial area that no longer exists, that's now been replaced by flats. Just heading onto a busy street now. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear me, but The sense of place was amazing. It's obviously extra novel for me and you, having lived in London, but even just if I'm thinking about like movies like The Florida Project, where you don't even have to have a familiarity with the actual environment, just how much it feels like it has a sense of place adds a lot of value to it. Yeah, what else? I mean, we talked recently about Hundreds of Beavers. I think we were both quite interested in the way it sort of built this this framework, this kind of like the logic of the movie, the plot, like piecing together the plotting and kind of watching that all take shape. This is obviously a movie that's very different from Hundreds of Beavers and what it's trying to achieve, but it's another movie that you can very clearly see like how they've stitched together all of the little subplots and the whole mechanics of how everything works. Like what one thing that occurred to me second time round watching it, where I was able to kind of focus on some details, knowing what was going to come, is just how smartly engineered and how efficient and lean the script is. Like the movie starts with a guy running along, being chased, then goes into an intimate scene with his girlfriend, which takes a turn when he makes this big grand sales pitch. And then it's a huge, big ensemble piece drama that spans the entire city. But then it ends with a small little intimate scene with his girlfriend, which takes a turn when he makes a sudden big sales pitch. And then that goes into him running along the road again, being chased. It's like just all of these little sort of setups and callbacks. Like there's a scene early on in the movie where the main point of the sequence is to just establish that he's like a man about town. He's a wheeler dealer. He's got, friends in low places, and he's just got his finger in loads of pies. So they have him go to like that old lady who actually he's trying to raise money, isn't he? He's trying to get together the 200 quid. So he goes to the old lady who runs boats and tries to sell her on this big dream. He goes to the guy who forges documents, and he goes to the guy who's like basically like a pimp for beggars, essentially, is what the closest I could work out what he is. And they're all really colourful characters, and they're brilliant little scenes. And if those characters never came back again, then they wouldn't feel superfluous to the movie at all. They'd feel like, they completely earned their place in the movie. But all three of those brief little scenes with those three little characters are setting up major parts of the movie. The old woman with the boats is the only person who actually does give him safe haven. And it's like that's a really nice little bit of texture to add in amongst all of the predators. And of course, it's at her place of business where the film ends. The guy with the beggars screws him over and betrays him, and it's kind of like the ultimate representation of that like ongoing betrayal that seems to plague him, and which he certainly is happy to put upon others as well. And then the forger guy, he's the guy that makes the license, the fake license for the femme fatale. Which then, when the police officer puts his drink on it, is revealed to be fake, and that's, her downfall is kind of entrusting in the main character. Forget his name, is it Harry? But yeah, there's a million things like that, a million details, a million little twists and turns, where it's like, okay, something's gonna go one way, but then someone notices that they have an opportunity because, I don't know, they just, an idea occurs to them halfway through someone saying something, or someone walked in at the right time and made this suggestion, and it's just like stitching together all of this happenstance in a really satisfying way, and a way that I really bought watching it. I think sometimes when you rewatch a sort of thriller like this, and you're less like on edge of like what's going to happen, and you're more, okay, let me now just like reappraise how it does happen. I know what's going to happen. Let me just sort of see how they actually put it all together. That's sometimes when the magic can be broken a little bit, and you end up kind of feeling like, that wasn't earned. That was a bit too neat. Oh, I guess they had to do that because, you know, they had to have some way for him to end up here or whatever. But that, it really, really stood up to that sort of rigorous reappraisal, and benefited from it, actually, because I became a lot more impressed when I noticed how early and how efficiently things were being peppered in. It's not the shortest movie, like especially for its day, but there's no fat on it, really. It's every single scene in the movie is a key and important thing happening, whether it's from a character perspective or from a plot perspective. Arguably, you could even add in a couple more scenes, because I think the relationship between the main character and his girlfriend is probably a little underserved compared to everything else that the film has going on. So, yeah, really loved it. Because I've sort of first watched it a few weeks ago, I've been living with the movie for a while, and I've had the chance to sort of read some of the behind the scenes things. I know that Jules Dassin, I don't know how you actually pronounce his name. It sounds French, but I think he is Russian or something. But he obviously directed Riveting, which we both love. And I think after seeing this movie as well, I'm now in the camp of, this guy isn't a one-trick pony. Like, I need to actually put in the work and check out as many of his films as possible. But apparently he was being blacklisted when this movie was being made, and the general word about town was like that he's never going to work again after this. He was like, it wasn't, all blacklisting was wrongful, of course, but he wasn't wrongfully blacklisted in the sense that, like, he was, I think, a pretty, like, politically left, potentially communist guy. Not in any way condoning McCarthyism, but it's not like someone informed on him just out of pettiness, and he never said or did anything of the like. I think he was quite known to be, like, very much a supporter of the workers and stuff like that. So when he was making this film, because he had the suspicion that this was going to be the last film he made, or that even the ability to make that film could be taken away from him at any moment, he shot all the most expensive parts first, so they'd be in the can in case, like, funding was pulled. I think he also went all out on this movie, in the sort of feeling like he might not get to make another one. And apparently they took away the edit from him. I'm not sure which version you watched. The version I watched has a unhappy ending, whereas the American version of it has a happy ending. And the ending of this film is so perfect, I can't really imagine it with a happy ending. I mean, the character Harry, I think he's called, the main character, he's just such a great example, maybe the best example that I can think of this sort of, he's his own worst enemy. Like, nothing will ever work out right for him. He's just kind of cursed. He could literally, like, be gifted the most comfortable, best position in the world, CEO of a massive company, or win the lottery or whatever, and he would manage to fuck it up because he's always trying to jimmy things to, he's trying to get an extra inch out of everything. The film starts with him showing up at his girlfriend's house, and he explains the situation he's in, where he's found some doctor, some chemist, some pharmacist who has some sort of pill that Harry, believes has far greater potential than the pharmacist is aware of in a whole different industry, namely automotive industry. He's going to use it as a source of fuel or something. And he wants to start a business of paying this pharmacist a little bit of money to make this pill thing, which he then sells for loads more. But he needs money from Mary, a lot of money. I think it was 300 quid, which I'd imagine is a hell of a lot of money in 1950 to get started. And you're thinking, okay, he doesn't even have he's got this harebrained scheme, which already seems like super speculative, but he doesn't even have the money to kind of kickstart that. But then we find out that he didn't even have the £5 needed to buy the pills from the pharmacist. So he's got this other guy to give him £5 to take 10% share of the business, which in his eyes is going to be like, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds or more. But he's given away 10% of it because he needed £5 to buy the pill, and he didn't even have the £5, and now he's being chased through the streets. And it's like, as soon as we meet him, he's already he's like 2 steps down from the thing he's trying to do. And that continues throughout the whole movie. Like, that almost is like that is just the whole movie. Is literally him digging himself 1 or 2 steps down, then getting 1 step ahead, then 1 step backwards, then 2 steps backwards, and he's always owing money to this person, but he manages to get it off this person as long as this comes true. And you see so many times in the movie where he actually, against the odds, manages to do really, really well at kind of leveling things off and meeting the stakes at the 11th hour. And he's incredibly inventive. And I guess his downfall really is that he pisses off a couple of really powerful people, like, for example, his employer for much of the movie, the club owner, and they just decide, you know, I'm actually specifically going to try and screw this guy over. And, you know, that is just what happens when you do what he does in this movie. It's not like you watch that and you go like, oh my God, it was such an injustice. It was like, no, he was constantly, you know, toying with this really dangerous situations. But at the same time, you kind of feel for him where you're like, he was really close. He was getting really close to actually kind of working it all out and making it all click together. But then, you know, could he ever really be satisfied and just like content and still? Or as soon as that, you know, let's say he managed to pull off that big wrestling promotion thing, you know, there's every chance that he would have just doubled down, double or nothing, tried to use that as a springboard into something way riskier where there's a lot more people's lives hang in the balance. Like, it's interesting just watching like him sort of wrestle for his soul like that throughout the whole film, and kind of wrestle for the audience's approval in a way. Apparently in the book he's way worse. Like, he, you know, beats his girlfriend. I think he pimps her out and stuff. Whereas in the movie, they just kind of like made him a bit more palatable for, you know, regular audiences, which obviously I haven't read the book, but I think that was a really good decision, because I think he's kind of like Jimmy McGill in Better Call Saul, where he's like exactly teetering between sort of irredeemable and sort of lovable scoundrel. And it's not even lovable scoundrel, it's more just like worthy of sympathy in a way, you know. Like, you go back and forth where you're like, for me personally, I see a movie like this and I see a character like this, and I've got a little bit of the "there but for the grace of God go I" response to it, where I'm like, you know, I've definitely had my harebrained schemes over the years, and I can completely get behind this guy who's like sort of living in the gutter and just doesn't want to just like Mary advises him at the beginning, to open a little newsagents or just some like honest little business. He wants to shoot for the stars, and like, you know, he kind of respect that and you can empathize with that. And he sees other people successful and he's like, well, he is incredibly talented and very charismatic. We see this when he's sort of conning people. But then you go, no, he is incredibly selfish and self-centered. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of humanist characterization running throughout the film, not just him, but like the wife of the club owner and even the club owner himself. You know, it'd be very easy for that character to just be like a pure fat cat, evil bastard, but he's got more going on. Like obviously he's very madly in love with his wife, and he's also tired and exhausted, but he's pragmatic. And I think many of the characters in this movie contain multitudes and are just a lot more interesting than you would expect from like a crime film noir. And even if you just strip all that away and you just take it purely as a sort of like straight crime movie, it's incredibly entertaining and thrilling. So yeah, I'm sure you got stuff to say about it, and hopefully you liked it, because really, really connected with me. And after this and Rafifi, I'm eager to check out more from this director.
Yeah, just after listening to your message there, after my tennis escapades that I was telling you about earlier. So I'm just not doing my usual walk around the park when I'm recording this. I'm at my desk, so I might actually be able to get a few names, since I actually have the movie, who, like you, name I struggle to remember. Oh yeah, Night in the City. That's a good start. Yeah. So I like Rafifi. I had a problem with the final third, so I wouldn't say I loved Rafifi, but I would say now after Night in the Sea and Rafifi that I love this director, and I love how he captures. Well, in Rafifi, I specifically love how he captures that famous scene, that heist scene. But after this, I would actually say I love how he captures people. Now, I will say, so yeah, I did like this movie a lot. Not as much as you, but I had a really good time with this movie. Now, to begin with, there's one thing I had to get past first that's fine for me to get past, but I don't know. I could see it. Well, I watched it with my partner, actually, but so she wouldn't have the same patience as me, but she did actually get into the movie. But I had a real problem with, well, I've got the name here, because I've actually got the Wikipedia open. Richard Wildmark, the guy who plays Harry Fabian. I really didn't like his acting at all. And I had to tune into the fact that, you know, this archetype and this character type was a thing at the time. Like this kind of like wacky, yay, wise guy, what are you gonna do? What about me, eh? Like, and he's like those shoes, those kind of really kind of flash shoes, that he's acting something that he's trying to convey something that is of his time and of the acting of the time that I can no longer connect with. So I thought his performance, I had to say, okay, this is a style of acting from the 50s. Just change your expectations and you can settle into it. And once I did that, I had no problems with his performance. And one thing that helps with that is that the character is definitely very compelling. And the other thing that helps with it as well is that the other performances are really good. Like the Googie Wittis, who plays the femme fatale woman who's married to the club owner, and the club owner, like I'm very knowledgeable today because I'm just fucking reading their names. Francis L. Sullivan, who played the club owner, is really good, and even the wrestlers who are like, you know, like pretty one note, they didn't bother me as much as the main character, but that's fine anyway, because like I said, I really like the character so much that after a few minutes I was like, okay, I'll just have to accept he's very. I felt he was a lot more stagey than the other characters, like and his movements, and I don't know his background, but I feel like he was swinging around poles like with a little bit of Gene Kelly in him. But like I said, after about 10 minutes, I got past that and settled into it. I don't know why it has come to mind, but probably better. Probably Jimmy McGill is a better reference point for this. But I know you'll get this reference because we talked about it at the time. But you remember when Alfie Moon comes into the first episode of EastEnders that he's in, and he kind of does all these like mini cons around the square, Albert Square that is, and he does like so many little mini like little kind of like, oh, this guy is a little bit of a wheeler dealer, this guy's a little bit of a manipulator, and like obviously in retrospect, like Alfie Moon's done the most shittiest things imaginable, but at the time we're like, oh, that's quite a cool introduction. I really like how this character is portrayed. Like you said, we get him being chased to begin with, and then you're thinking, where's he going? And then he like switches from being absolutely chased to like changing his posture and just knocking on the door within a chase sequence, so we can see the way that this character is able to switch on a dime to manipulate people and to get what he wants, which is really fun to follow this character. And we also see him around London, and like you said, I did look that up actually, that the director Jules, what's his name, Jules Dassin, I did read that he was like, right, let's shoot the most expensive exterior scenes we can, so they can't like pull the plug on this movie. And it is the probably the most lived in London that I've seen from that time, actually. But yeah, following the Harry Fabian character is just so much fun, man. Like, and I've got a little bit of a different read on him compared to you, but I wouldn't necessarily argue with anything you've said. I feel like this guy is a potential like CEO, a potential like millionaire. Maybe Harry Fabian's pulled the wool over my eyes as well. But I feel like if he's in a different circle, if he's in a different environment, if he's around a different bunch of people, he can use his hustling ways in a different way. But it's because he's around, the guy who's pimping out beggars, the forger, because he's around low-end versions of people he needs to succeed. He succeeds at a very low level, whereas I feel this guy could succeed at a much higher level if he's around like a much more a different circle. And I just love how we see him like manipulate the Americans in the bar at that time when he's like, oh, this guy, and then he's finding out information on the fly and he's adapting in order to get these people to go to this club, spend this money here. And when he goes to a wrestling match, the way he sees the wrestler, what's his name? I can't remember what it is. It's a Greco-Roman wrestler. Anyway, he wants this. Is it Gregorius? Is that his name? Just when he sees him absolutely losing his shit over the style of wrestling we see, and he goes out the side door, and then Harry Fabian goes out the side door and just waits for Gregarious to come out, and he immediately like creates a situation where I want my money back. This isn't proper wrestling, and manages to manipulate him into thinking he knows something that he knows very little about. And even how he later on manages to manipulate the two wrestlers who are totally at loggerheads to have a match. Like, he's actually really talented at manipulating and really talented at about setting things up. I just feel he's in an absolute cesspit of a place, like, where it's very ruthless and cutthroat, so he has to adapt these traits. And obviously we get this little backstory with his girlfriend. We see a picture of them on a boat, which again actually harken back to the end of the movie, where he tries to leave by boat actually. So there is a lot of symmetry, like you said. It kind of gives the impression that London has brought out the worst in him, and he wasn't always like this. That's my read on the character. This isn't something that's going to resonate with everybody, but it's certainly something that resonated with me, and maybe it would resonate with you a little bit as well. Regarding the freshness of this, I don't think I've heard or expected to hear in the 1950s somebody or the lines, "I'm going to control wrestling in this town." And yeah, it's pretty fresh and it's pretty cool. I know London had quite a big professional wrestling scene at some point, so maybe it did extend back to the 1950s, where I know there's this guy Big Daddy that was a massive wrestler, but I thought that was the 70s and the 80s, and they used to have it on TV quite a lot. It does a really good job with the wrestling side of this as well. Like, it kind of hints, or at least maybe I'm looking at this retrospectively, that it's predetermined, but at the same time, it manages to work in a wrestling feud that kind of works both ways. That, you know, they have different styles of wrestling and different philosophies, and it kind of is hinted when they're practicing the moves that it is fake. But then when we get this big fight between Gregorius and what's the guy's name, the Strangler, like, I'm not a fan of choreographed fights from the 50s, because a lot of them seem like punch, bam, and the sound effect, it's very dated. But I thought this, the wrestling fight that takes place, like, there's a term in wrestling called shoot wrestling fight, which means real, as opposed to you know, a working wrestling fight. But the shoot, as in a real wrestling fight that takes place between these two characters, is intense. And like the bear hug and the headlock in wrestling nowadays, they're not much of a move anymore, but the way the movie depicts these moves as being really deadly, and the scrappiness, like, you almost get the impression that they're scraping each other's eyes out in this scene, even through the bear hug, and the intensity of this fight. It's a really dirty, vicious, quite shocking fight actually for the time. I think that's the most one of the most graphic fights I've ever seen from something in a 1950s film. Like, it's brilliant. It's really intense, and the movie continues on from there. And yeah, I really like the other cast of characters as well, like his long-suffering girlfriend. Like, the way she reacts to him when she first sees him, like, with disdain and almost hate, and then we see her go upstairs to the neighbor, and she's got a bright smile on her face, and like, it tells us a hell of a lot without the need for like so much dialogue in that, and seeing, like, God, she really, like, rues the day when her boyfriend or situationship, wherever the fuck it is, comes home, compared to the how happy she is around the guy upstairs. And yeah, I really liked the club owner, the Francis L. Sullivan, the actor who plays the guy, the Silver Fox club owner. I really liked him as well, you know, because he's like a snake. He reminded me of a little bit like Kingpin or something, like a that type of like big, like physical presence, but at the same time he's really cunning. And like I love the way when the femme fatale character, his wife, she like sets up this trap where she says, if you can come up with £200, Fabian, we'll match you. And it's kind of a little bit of a ruse. And then she banks Fabian with £200, and then he comes back with it. And like in a minute, the Silver Fox Club owner guy is like, he looks at the fur where he bought her the fur coat earlier, and he knows when a minute that something's up. And we see him looking at pictures of her earlier, and he's like really physical acting, which doesn't happen so much at the time, unless your name is Marlon Brando. And he and then he just looks in her coat hanger place, and then he doesn't say anything. He just waits, which is brilliant as well. And then later on, like he works out the whole plan within like 5 minutes, and he just sits on it, and it comes up with the offer that, oh, I'll back you with the wrestling promotion. I just have to be a silent partner. And he sets them all up to fail, which is absolutely fantastic. And he just waits on it. But Fabian being the scrappy, like you said, Jimmy McGill is a great analogy, that he manages to somehow get the impossible to work at one stage, and it's looking really good for him. And like you said, and I don't disagree, that this character is his own worst enemy, and it's almost like the Paul Newman character in The Hustler, where he starts off winning the pool competition, he just goes back and he ends up losing all the money. Like there's definitely a sense of that with the Harry Fabian character. It's interesting. I watched The Odd Man Out recently, which is this movie set in Northern Ireland about this IRA man who did this bank job goes wrong, and he's on the run through the streets of Belfast. And I think it's also shot on location in the streets of Belfast. And in the final third of this movie, again, God, this name doesn't stick to it. The final third of Night in the City reminded me very much of Odd Man Out. And even so much that the woman in the Irish woman, what's her name here? Can't find it now. But that woman, she's also in The Odd Man Out, and she's somebody that the main character goes for help in The Odd Man Out, but like she calls the police in like 2 seconds. And The Odd Man Out is quite a weird movie because it's apolitical. So the character is not referred to as someone in IRA. He's in the organization. So if anyone doesn't know the history, he's just a mobster. Like it's so like it's such a strange like depiction of Belfast, and kind of almost being disillusioned with a cause, the main character throughout the whole movie, and the ending is it's kind of like has shades of this, but this movie, it does it so much better. And like after that intense wrestling match, and after things go array, is that the right word? And there's a I think it's £1,000 reward out on Fabian. It almost becomes like a little bit like the latest John Wick movie, where right, it's time to get him, and because the work has been done earlier, we see him interacting with all these his kind of like social network, if you will, kind of like John Wick's social network, that we get to see like him interact with his social network after there's a hit out on him. And it's very much the case, like we already know these characters would like sell their own mother for a quick buck, and watching him navigate that world and try and navigate and escape is really good. And funny enough, actually, talking about the location of London and the great usage of it, the finale of this takes place on Hammersmith Bridge. And years ago, when I first came to London and didn't know much about the place. I absolutely got hammered drunk in Kingston, and I got lost, and I just kept on walking, and I came across this bridge that looked like so iconic and massive to, you know, an Irishman that was only in the country for a month. And so I'll never forget the bridge. So when I saw the same bridge being used in the iconic finale of this, it was really nice to see, and it was really nice to see like the areas I could geographically, because it's an area that I visited quite a lot after that as well. I used to live around that area. I'm very geographically familiar with that area, so every groove and every cranny where this is filmed from at the end, I know quite well. So it was really cool to see that from 1950. But the kind of finale of this and the kind of character realization and the ending scene, shall we say, it rings a hell of a lot more true than The Odd Man Out for me, and it really worked. And to be fair, I think the actor does a really good job in the final scene of coming to this realization and realizing, you know, in the quote of I can't remember which guy says it, but that he had it all, but he's like a dead man walking. Like the way he comes to that realization, and the way he tries desperately to make a heroic gesture, shall we say. It's so desperate and true to the character, I guess is the word, that it was a really strong ending as well. And I don't know what the happy version of this ending is, of this movie is, but I certainly didn't get it, unless he starts swimming after that ending with the strangler. But yeah, like you, I am on the, what's his name, the Jules Dassin train. Ironically, it is interesting that he has a, I don't know on the list of his most famous movies, but Rafifi certainly must be. That he seems to be very skilled in adapting stories, so I'd love to know how different this is from the novel, because what he did with Rafifi and how he managed to like get to the meat of what could be great about that story and remove it from the novel was very compelling, and I wondered did he do the same with this. Yeah, so I'm definitely on the Dassin train. I don't think he's made many movies actually, but yeah, he's not born in Russia or wherever he said. He's actually born in America as far as I know, but his parents are Jewish. But yeah, very much enjoyed this. Actually, having just looked at the Jules Dassin filmography, he actually did do quite a lot of movies. I must be just thinking he didn't do many movies in America. So yeah, we've got a nice little treasure trove of potential classics. I would definitely say The Night in the City is a classic. Rafifi I really liked, but like I said, final act rubbed me the wrong way a bit.
Hey Matt, just left the house there. It's about 8 o'clock. Absolutely stunning weather. I mean, I think it's going to be too hot today. I mean, an absolute scorcher, like pretty much Californian weather right here. But it's early in the morning, so it's a nice cool breeze. Quietly sneaked out of the house so as not to wake the wife and daughter. And yeah, just listened to some Offspring there. Ran through your voice notes. I've taken some notes. So yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It's funny. This is, we obviously talk about movies all the time, and sometimes we talk about movies that we've both seen, but we're kind of revisiting, that like maybe we've seen millions of times or we've seen once years ago. But this is the first time I can remember speaking to you about a movie that I've seen twice. Now granted, the first viewing I completely botched because I was too tired, but I've seen twice in quick succession and you've seen once. And you're talking about like the adjustment that you needed to make in terms of how endearing you found the main character and like the acting style and stuff like that, how that was sort of something you needed to adjust to, and you eventually kind of found your footing with him or with the movie. It doesn't sound like it created an enormous amount of friction, but like I said in my previous voice note, when I started the movie, I'm going, all right, we're going to LA. We've got a gumshoe detective, and he's trying to unravel some massive conspiracy mystery, which is, again, a prejudice I shouldn't carry into film noirs, but did. And it took me a little while to adjust to it. The second time watching this movie, knowing it's, I wouldn't describe it as a melodrama, but like the focus is just on watching like this character drama play out. The second time going in, knowing exactly what the movie was a much stronger viewing for me. It was pretty much a flawless viewing. And I'm a big fan of this guy who plays Harry Fabian. When I say I'm a big fan, I've never seen him before in my life, but I'm a big fan in the context of this movie. It really works for me. In fact, a lot of why it works for me, you hit upon. So I think perhaps you got to the point of saying that you're a fan of the acting, of the performance. That constant code switching he does where, like, as you said, you see it in the opening sequence where he's desperate, he's on death's door, he's running for his life. And then when he drops his little carnation, bends over, picks it up again. Like, why are you picking up a flower in the middle of while you're running for your life? And then before he goes into Mary's apartment, he pats it down, strains up, puts it in his lapel, walks in, big smile on his face, launches into, if she hadn't heard it a million times before, what would be a fantastic sales pitch and performance. And he gets completely rejected. He gets crumpled up into a little piece of paper. He goes into this really morose state of talking about how nothing's going to ever happen to him. And the next scene we see him in, again, like you said, it's that Alfie Moon arriving in Albert Square vibe where he's just skipping down the street, hey, oh, talking to all the different, low lives, for want of a better word. It's amazing how, if you watch any 10 minutes of this movie, you're going to get to see him with the complete front, and then with that completely destroyed and smashed down to oblivion. And I don't know, I think he's fantastic. What I did have a bit of a journey with in the first time I watched it is I really disliked him from the beginning, because I hate con artists. In real life, I hate scammers. I hate, these people who call you up and tell you that you got, something wrong with your computer and you need, then they try and take all your money. I'm not just trying to position that as some sort of radical, what I hate? Look, of course, everyone hates that, but I found it hard at the beginning of the movie when you've got this really pure soul that is Mary, who's someone who is also in the gutter, and she's just doing the right thing. She's putting away her 2 bob. She's really on the level. She's just a really good person, and she's fallen in love with this guy who's exploiting her and preying upon her, and just can't be trusted, and you can't believe anything he says. So sometimes I have this thing of it might take me a little bit of time to like a character for its narrative value if I dislike the character on a personal level. And that was resolved relatively quickly when I started to become enamored with the movie and the filmmaking. But upon revisiting it, I obviously had already gone through that journey, so I just liked him from the get-go. And as I said, although he's although there's a lot to criticize there, as you said, he could be a CEO in another life. He's been placed at the bottom of the barrel, and he's in amongst dodgy types, and he's sort of taken this like sink or swim type of philosophy to it. It feels there's a lot that I can forgive, I guess, is that not necessarily the best way of putting it, but I can see myself, like I've met people like this before and embraced them to some extent. You know, I was, as I was watching the movie there the other day, I was thinking about a guy who was, most people would be like, just want this guy as far away from me as possible, because it's only a matter of time before he screws over me, kind of thing. And he ended up homeless at one point, and I took him in, and, you know, it was an absolute nightmare for me. But like often when I found these people in real life, I've just wanted them to, I guess I'm kind of like the Mary in that situation. It's like, I just feel like they're just the right shot, or the right, this little bit of growth away from becoming a version of themselves that is sustainable within society. And we see that in this movie, and that's what one of the best things about this movie. I mean, I think that's why this movie should be talked about more, and should be more of a kind of a widely adopted classic. The how close he gets to being, let's say, the club owner, to getting that level of clout and stability where it can work. As you said, he's being thrown like landmines constantly by the club owner, where every time he thinks he's got a break, it's actually he's being set up to fail. Yet he manages, through his ingenuity, to sort of, against all the odds, build something that would work. But eventually he just gets he gets too many sabotages come his way, and B, there's a piece of incredible bad luck, which is that the fight between the Strangler and Gregorius ends in Gregorius dying, which is like one of these, for God's sake, the bad luck on that. But he does, you will always have this kind of like Schrodinger's cat, not quite knowing, well, if that had worked, if he managed to pull off that show, his first show, and he had Gregorius in his camp, so the sun wasn't going to ever move against them, and they managed to put on that show, and it sold out, and it was a massive hit, and he's no longer owes anyone any money. Like, we'll never know whether that would be the start of a really stable empire, which is what the club owner has, or he would have just tried to double or nothing that into some other precarious scheme that ends up, falling flat. And I think that the movie does a very good job, in my opinion, of not clarifying one or the other. Like, both, if you were to say, look, I know that there's no chance that he's ever going to take on that straight and narrow life, then the movie will back that up. And if you go, no, if he hadn't been sabotaged and had bad luck in this, when he came this close, this kind of Icarus moment, then he would have come good then, and then he would have finally got what he wanted, and he would have got married to Mary and all happily ever after. I think the film very much backs that up, reading as well. So that to me is just masterful human drama, and makes me surprised I've never heard of this movie before. But yeah, like he's 2 for 2 with Rififi. I can't really remember the third act problems you had with Rififi. It certainly is a film that peaks in the heist scene, but I seem to remember liking it the whole way through. But as you said, the characterization work within this and Rififi like massively elevates it. I think when people think Rififi is the iconic heist movie, they're thinking, okay, so it's going to be just a series of tropes getting the gang together, talking about the security system, the unreliable person who is the weak link. But it is all that, but it's also, it works as a great movie because of the great character work in it. You were talking about the adaptation, like how he manages to get the best out of novels, and his work, at least in the case of the 2 movies that we've seen, like is very transformative of the original work. Well, I now listen to some podcasts about Night in the City, if that's what it's called. Again, the name is so generic, it's impossible to remember. But I've listened to some podcasts about it, and it turns out that he didn't read the original book, Night in the Sea, and he didn't read the book Rififi. And it's kind of like Verhoeven not reading Starship Troopers. We're like, no, I don't need to read it. I know enough to do what I want to do, kind of thing. That's the impression I get. Certainly seems to have worked out in this case. One thing I do know about the original book of Night in the City is that Fabian's character is a lot darker. I may have mentioned this in the previous voice note, but yeah, he beat his wife, he pimps her out, he's completely unforgivable. There's actually a remake of Night in the City starring De Niro as Fabian. Came out in 1992. It's not supposed to be amazing, but could be worth a look. I wonder, does that follow the characterization we see in the 1950 movie, or does it go a bit darker like the book? But I think, as I said there a minute ago, I think by putting him like right at the halfway point between irredeemable and, just one break away from being like a decent guy is just really effective in this movie. So I'm just looking around because I'm trying to do a little bit of early morning shopping. There we go. That's what I'm looking at. So, yeah, what else? Just looking over the things that you mentioned there. I was one thing that I just forgot to say, but like obviously we both lived in London in the 21st century, and when he's trying to get that £400 together, and it's like, £400, I just need 400 quid, that's all I need. Okay, here's 200 quid, I'll match it with this 200 quid. Here's like, the figure is so like often mentioned that it's like completely concrete in your head, that when it then cuts to like Fabian's gym, and there's like 60 wrestlers and all this equipment, huge setup, I was like, Jesus Christ, 400 quid went a long way in London back in the day. It's really cool, like watching a film that we're both so familiar. Like you were talking about that bridge. I also worked for years in like the West End, Soho kind of area, and I know this area so well, like the central London area where it's set. Not just the photo veneer that you kind of would see in a Jane Fonda movie or something like that, or Paddington or something, but the sort of underbelly of that area, and that obviously still exists to this day, all of the like club touts and prostitutes, everything like that. And it's cool to see a movie that's sort of like walking across the lines of the glamour and the underbelly of that part of London. And yeah, I don't know, it just works really well despite how old it is. The thing you're saying about how like he's so inventive, he's such a kind of genius at his trade. I love that that's acknowledged by the wife of the club owner, who actually only on repeat viewing did I pick up on that they had a previous relationship, and I think she either left him for the club owner or they broke up and then she got with the club owner. It's in one throwaway line of dialogue, unless I'm misinterpreting it. Not really an important plot point, but they're both trying to climb out of the gutter is, I think, the thing you're supposed to take away from that. But she says to the club owner, he's still the best club tout in London, or something like that, because he's just brought in those 3 Americans to the Silver Fox, and the club owner is like, yeah, like agreement. I like that his skill, he is brilliant at what he does, and what he does is undervalued, and it's not considered to be a transferable skill, but it is recognized by the other people in the movie. I'm just going to pop in to do a little bit of shopping, and then I'll send a few more thoughts in a minute. Okay, that was a pretty fruitless excursion. Just a couple of last little points that you raised I wanted to touch on. The intensity of that wrestling fight, it's great. It's so sweaty. It's such a mixture between like skilled moves, or as much as someone who knows nothing about wrestling can assume that to be the case anyway, with sort of frantic, like just do whatever I'm available to do with my 3 limbs, like smacking the other guy on the head or whatever. Both people are just like really going for it. And also the Strangler, who delivers a great performance, as you said, as this just complete thug, this complete like wild loose cannon he's a brute, isn't he? He's just a complete brute who, quite rightly doesn't like seeing insulted, doesn't like the fact that Gregorius looks down his nose at him, and he just wants to set things right, which is what he kind of does throughout the movie based on his own worldview. But how he's just clearly really fucking going for Gregorius, and then Gregorius is just like wiser and kind of manages to best him in the fight, but then the fight has just taken everything out of Gregorius, and then we see, like, I think quite a brilliant death scene where he sort of I love that you can't pin that down to one specific thing. Like, he hasn't sort of specifically hit his head. I know Strangler's been like punching him in the head and stuff like that. Like, you can kind of say overall, like, if you wanted to give some sort of specific clinical diagnosis to the cause of death, you probably could from what we see in the fight. But more so, it just feels like he's an old man who doesn't have much left to give, and he's just spent the last of him, and we just see him like fade away. That's fantastic. Like the fight sequence, which then leads into the death sequence, and that whole sequence is brilliant, and it kind of needs to be on a fairly high quality considering its significance within the plot. And then the other thing you mentioned is like what happens after that, where the hit is kind of called out on him, and every sort of hitman or heavy in London is on his tail, and you get this sort of John Wick montage of the guy driving around and saying there's £1,000 from the man who finds Harry Fabian, and everyone's coming out of the woodwork, everyone's trying to find him, and he's often literally being pursued by them. He managed to do that clever evasion with the police officer, which again is just like classic. This movie always reminding you of how smart and inventive he is. But I hate the lore of the John Wick movies. Well, hate is a strong word, because I can kind of get a little bit involved with it, because it's like, well, at least it gives those films some sense of identity, something unique about those films that doesn't just make them like generic action movies. But I love the action in the John Wick movies, like the choreography, for the most part. Sometimes it's a bit too ridiculous and too weightless, but a lot of it is brilliant. Kind of keeps me coming back to that franchise, and I've enjoyed most of them. But the first John Wick movie is like such a lean little revenge thriller that now it's got this kind of like Tolkien level lore. I find that quite overbearing, and it's just hard to reconcile it with what I'm looking for out of the movie. And when I watched this film, and particularly the stuff where he's being chased and the hits out on him and everything like that, I was very much reminded of John Wick. And it's like, okay, everyone in the city is looking for you. You're also staying in the city because it's not that easy to leave the city. He comes close, but it's not that easy. But you're doing what you can, and sometimes they have no idea where you are, and sometimes they know exactly where you are, but you can still run away. And it's just very reminiscent of John Wick. And it's kind of an opportunity to watch that, like a certain element of John Wick. Like you could say that the club owner is kind of like the hotel owner, or whatever. Like the people who are like, you've got this guy, he runs the wrestling, and it's that sort of John Wick thing of like these important figureheads. We don't see, it's not a story about regular London civilians and stuff. It's just all these like important centers of power, and our guy who's kind of aligned with some of them, but kind of isn't, and kind of his own guy. Like there is a lot of John Wick overlap. Some of it you kind of have to force a bit, and some of it it's just like staring you straight in the face. But without the lore, without the silly pageantry, and it just made me think, wow, this is just so much better. I know there's no obvious reason to compare the two movies because they're not going for the same experience at all. I'm not saying like, you shouldn't watch John Wick, you should watch Night in the City because it's the better version of John Wick. It's not that at all, but it was just interesting seeing a movie that pulls off so well some of the things that John Wick is trying to do, and in my opinion, doing quite poorly. So yeah, it's interesting that it kind of like that franchise came to both of our minds. I think it would for a lot of people watching it now, because obviously John Wick is one of the biggest franchises around. But yeah, in summation, loved it. He, like you said, has made quite a few movies. He apparently, and I'm just parroting what I've heard on the podcast here, but apparently like he was originally signed to MGM, and like back then you didn't really get to, like if you were a director, you didn't really get to choose the projects that you made, because like the studio was very much the ones who decided everything, and it was just like you were basically just clocking into your job and making the script that they told you to make that month, and we're churning them out. And he wasn't proud of the work he did back then, to the point of like, yeah, you kind of almost disowned them, and current day opinion on them is somewhat divided. But leading up to Night in the City, which was his last Hollywood movie, as I understand it, he made a few supposedly brilliant crime films, Night and the City being the fourth of a sequence of really good crime films. So if you are interested, I'm definitely up for checking out the three films that lead up to it, because I think it'd probably be a nice suite of films. And then obviously he gets blacklisted. Night in the City gets taken out of his hands in the edits. I think he disowned Night in the City as well, because he felt like at least the most common version of it floating around didn't have his authorial stamp on it. I'm not sure how he feels about the version that we saw, if he feels that that's what he was trying to do, or if he feels that, or well, he's dead now, but if he felt that that was also sort of not really coming from his voice. But it's obviously like peak him within Hollywood. So those four movies, including Night in the City, are very highly regarded. And then the films he made after he left America, Rafifi being the most famous of them, but I think there's several others that are supposed to be good. So yeah, I'd really like to learn more about him, because I've always known about Rafifi, and it's incredibly acclaimed movie, And because it's such an iconic and famous movie, I guess I've often heard his name, but I've never really heard his name as like this guy who has like this incredible catalogue of movies. I've more heard it as like, he's the director of Rafifi. And now, having seen this and learned a little bit about him, I feel like there is probably a catalogue there. Not to mention knowing a little bit about him, knowing that he was like, you know, very commie, and that, you know, his movies are not overtly political propaganda pieces, but are like, I like the idea of a director, and again, I haven't seen enough of his movies to sort of be able to say whether this actually does describe his career, but in the case of this movie, it feels like he's using, kind of like Coppola did with Godfather, he's using the crime world as opposed to like the business world or the politics world to make a sort of, not satire because it's very much a thriller, but to comment on capitalism and the sort of dog-eat-dog exchange that crushes the common man. Like, if I didn't know that he was like such a champion of the workers and stuff like that, then I might watch Night in the City and, you know, I'd think about that as a theme, but I wouldn't be that focused on it. But watching his films, which from the two that we've seen are about like desperate men who live in a society that's completely built on how much money do you have, and if you don't have enough, then you're screwed. Trying, like, maybe going to desperate measures to their downfall to get ahead or like get above others or whatever. Like, it'd be interesting to see more of his films, both because they're probably brilliant films just in their own right, but also like looking at them through that lens, and we might end up feeling like he's the great leftist director of his day or something. But yeah, brilliant movie. Probably lots more that like I could say about like individual little moments, because I do think it's just constantly peppered with great moments. But broadly speaking, just enjoyed the hell out of it. I'm really glad I revisited it because A, I got to see a great movie, and B, I think it really benefited from the lens that I brought the second time around as well.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.